always reminded me that I was Filipino. So though I don't speak the language, I don't think that's very uncommon for our generation. But I don't feel different. Although you might speak Tagalog fluently, I feel a kinship with you. And I feel that everywhere with other Filipinos.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that, in your experience, has this sort of like first generation, second generation divide, has that, have you felt rifts, and is that kind of like breaking down a little bit?
Yeah, is the short answer. It was a struggle. I mean, I think, John, you can speak to this too, in the process of making this movie.
Well, I mean, growing up...
We got some pushback.
Yeah, we did. I mean, growing up in Jersey City, New Jersey, and just not... A lot of people didn't know, like, when we were growing up, like, are you Chinese? Are you Korean? And it's like, no, I'm Filipino. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, I kind of have to work hard and prove myself and, join the union. And there's no Filipinos there, so I just have to stand on my own. And you still get, like, riffed on there. And then next thing you know, you have the opportunity to make a Filipino film. And then it's more than food. And then it's all about your culture, and then you learn so much more. And then you bring it to the West Coast, and you meet all these people, and you inspire these people, and then it just creates this fire inside you that I am a Filipino, and I am strong, and I have a strong support, so there are risks, and so bring it, because we're gonna just keep going.
Do you mean riffs within the community though too?
I'm sorry?
Do you also mean possibly riffs within the community?
Yeah.
Are you referring to crab mentality?
Right. Buzzword. Which is very delicious, by the way. When applied to, and sort of, and also colonial mentality, right? Like it occurred to me, that when that slide popped up of like Filipinos support other successful Filipinos, I was also kind of thinking, well, kind of, yeah, but when Americans say, like when white people say they're great, like sometimes there's also that sense that, that the validation comes not necessarily from within the community, but from kind of like, the larger mainstream institutions. And I was wondering, one of the things that really struck me about the movie is how empowered, everybody in the movie was, and like I still remember growing up in the Philippines being taught that, that everything that white people did was better, right? And and I was wondering, kind of like, is that something that is that kind of like an ideology that you absorbed, and how were you able to sort of like fight it and kind of like let go, or maybe not, like maybe you're still wrestling with it?
I think personally it's like, it's true. I mean, 7 years ago I made a cuerdo pork longanisa and I sold it for $13 in Eagle Rock, California, and no one bought it. Because it's longanisa and it's $13 and it was made with cuerdo pork. They had no idea what that was. Fast forward 6 years, Jonathan Gold, rest in peace, he talks about Filipino food in LA and how it's amazing, and I do the exact same dish. And I charge the same price, and I sell out. And it just shows that we've been doing this for a really long time. I mean, cooking Filipino food, we're not pioneering that. Like, it's just that we're now becoming or being recognized by other societies and other cultures. And sometimes that's what it takes. I mean, it happens in anything. Like, it's like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. I could tell you Filipino food is good 15 times to my mom, and she won't believe me until someone tells me, like, yeah, you know what? your son makes good Filipino food, and the next thing you know, she's like, oh, he does, you know? You know, like, the biggest problem I've ever had my whole life is impressing my family. You know, everyone's struggled. Good grades, you know, valedictorian, all that stuff. We want to impress someone, but until we get those accolades, then it's like, oh, yung anak ni, valedictorian. It's like, I've been telling you they're smart, you know? Like, but yeah, I mean, like, it's a struggle our whole life, but you know what? It happens with everybody. You're not the MVP of an NBA until everyone tells you you're the MVP of the NBA. You can believe it, but until you're validated, I mean, and we're getting that. So now's the time where we just keep going and work hard, keep our heads down, and show them what we have.
Totally agree. And also, I just want to say, like, that is an interesting thing. It's an interesting question you brought up, because when I was making this film in the early stages, when I was pitching it, specifically when I was looking for financing, there were some questions that were lobbed to me, which were all coming down to the fact of who's going to host it, which Caucasian food writer is going to host it, which Caucasian celebrity is going to host it, which person that we recognize and know will co-sign this food that I've never heard of. And I was not as surprised when that came from non-Filipino people. I was really surprised when that came from Filipino people, you know? And it was this moment that I realized, when are we allowed to own our own food? When are we allowed to own our own success? When are we allowed to own our own restaurants? At what point do we stop asking permission, you know, to sort of speak on our own behalf? And that was the reason that I didn't want to have a God voice throughout the film. I didn't want to have a host. I just wanted these amazing people sharing the stage with me to be able to speak to their own experience and have that be enough. You know, to me, what's more powerful than personal experience? Nothing. It's irrefutable, you know, and I think that is the most amazing gift that we can give future generations, is our stories. And so for me, that was a very distinct choice, to not have a narrator and to let these chefs and these restaurateurs narrate their own stories.
Thoughts, Nicole?
Oh my gosh, what can I say to add to that? It stands on her own. I don't need to add anything to it. I don't need to add to that. It's a comment, and it's a narrative that stands on her own. She doesn't need any validation. But I can, if you're talking about personal experience, it's been my mission to do it without validation elsewhere. The fact that we received it, I wouldn't shun, and I accept wholeheartedly, but it was always about us. It was always on our terms, with our money, with our support, with our own empowerment. And I know if we do it on our own, no one can take it away from us.
Can we talk about family a little bit? You know, just the fact that, you know, like, so much of the movie is about, you know, like, recruiting people into the fold. I was drafted, by the way, 2 days ago. I'm like leaving the country for a month tomorrow. She's like, Meredith, you're drafted. You know, so how were you able to sort of involve your, you know, your partners, your family members, and what, I don't know, like, that seems so quintessentially Filipino, right? And yeah, can you just, like, describe that process?
Well, as you probably have heard, this was a totally self-financed film, and it was my daughter who recruited me.
Drafted.
I was drafted, correct. But she was actually, this was an idea that my friend and I, college had been throwing around for years, and we never got around to it. And one day over Thanksgiving, we said, well, what are we doing with that one? And Ali had overheard the story many times about us being frustrated. And she said, why not? Why aren't you guys doing it? I'll do it. And that's how it all started, over Thanksgiving Filipino dinner.
Over food, appropriately.
Yes.
John, you want to talk about how I drafted you?
Well, we were eating pizza. And we were just talking about, like, she came from LA, and, we're shooting in New York, filming in New York, and she's like, oh, I'm a big foodie, so she was like, where are the good Filipino restaurants around? And I said, well, you could kind of count them on your hands, and that's it, and call it a day. So we just started doing our research, and it just got real fast. And so for me, I drafted all my friends, using my tenure in being in the film business, all my friends, they've been a huge influence to me. So I was like, can I borrow your camera, please? I'll take real good care of it. But, and it happened though, but this wouldn't happen if no one stepped up. And each and every one of you guys stepped up. And that's my family. That's what I consider my family. You pretty much drafted everybody here in this auditorium, So everyone has something in this film, that they have given.
So I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I'm gonna go forward because I can't see you all. So I think you have to raise your hand and you have to shout. Because somebody have a question? I'm not sure if we have. Go ahead.
Hi, I think does it? Hi, amazing film. So congratulations to the director, producer, the whole team, and the chefs. It's just amazing. Congratulations. I have two questions. One is a follow-up to the chef's response. What do you think has been that triggering force that has made the Filipino food become more recognized? And the second question to the whole team, or maybe to the director specifically, is one of the key messages that I have taken away with me from that film is that food is an important marker of identity. So I was wondering, how do you think food can help preserve that identity not for you because you have a strong sense of your identity, but for other people, for other generations? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of research about why now. How come not 20 years ago? How come not 30 years ago? And then I just started to look around and looking at my friends in the industry and realized we're all the same age. And if you think about it, as the movie touches, we all came here around the same time. Our parents came here around the same time. They had us all at the same time. And 15 years ago, some of us became doctors, some of us became architects, and some of us became line cooks and prep cooks. And those prep cooks then became sous chefs. And those sous chefs then became chef de cuisines or head chefs of other restaurants for other cultures. At some point, at least I'm speaking for myself, I was saying, hey, why am I making all this money for this guy? I'm here 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. and I'm busting my butt. Why am I doing this for him? So, like a lot of my friends said, Filipino food's good, let's try it. And this day and age, we're now 30 years old. we've saved some money. Thankfully, there's places like Smorgasburg and food trucks and stuff like that where we can start with minimal amount of capital. But we have the experience. We have the 15 years of being a line cook, being a prep cook, being a sous chef. And that 15 years of experience has showed in our food. And it can't go unseen. If you taste it, you could taste the passion in the food nowadays. And I think that's why we are where we are. Because instead of creating restaurants to survive, like our first generation has, it's now become a passion. And when food becomes a passion, it translates a lot more because then you can feel the food. And I think that's God's honest truth on why people like Jonathan Gold and those guys have really made us and put us on a pedestal.
100%. Everything you said, ditto. And I guess to your second question, how can food be sort of a preserver of cultural memory? I think is kind of what it was. I think for me, and again I can speak from my experience, food has always been a way to remember. It's always been a meeting place. It's sort of so much more than just sustenance, And I think that I hear this from a lot of second generation, third generation Filipino Americans. What do you remember when you think of your family and your culture? You remember the food. You remember what you had for breakfast, what your mom made you. You remember what your grandmother made. And if we can preserve those recipes and preserve that way of experiencing each other, then we can preserve our culture. Because there are a lot of Filipinos that have assimilated. There are a lot of Filipinos that don't speak the language. And if it's not the language that binds us, what binds us? It's our shared experiences. And so for me, the food is just one way of doing that. We can have shared experiences in many other ways. A lot of people go to church. A lot of people go to restaurants. You know what I mean? Like it's at the end of the day, it's building a community. And here, in just making this film, we've seen the community come out. We've seen people meet each other. Tonight was actually the first night that Alvin met Nicole, after all this time. And that's what, we're realizing is that if we can make these connections, then we're just ever stronger as a community and we're ever stronger as a culture.
So last question, no pressure, but it has to be really good. Who has a question? Hi, do you want the mic or can you shout it?
I can shout it.
Okay.
Hi, if we were to go to AMBOY or Jeepney, what should we order?
All right, that was an excellent question.
I would start with the Pookie Pookie Punch. I don't know if you know this, but tiki culture in the 40s, are you familiar with Tiki Drinks? It's a whole movement, right? But all the bartenders at Don the Beachcomber, all the original bartenders at these American-owned tiki bars were all Filipino. And when you see the use of mango and guava, where do you think that came from? So for us, putting together a tiki program at Jeepney wasn't so much hopping on a bandwagon that it is now. It was really an homage to the people that actually made it happen. So yes, either the Pookie Pookie Punch or the Gino Rosero is the drink. Very good. And it's hard to pick, so I would just say Kamayan.
Well, not that many people know this, but we're going to be opening an AMBOY in New York City within the next year. It's signed, it's dirty and ugly right now, but we're working on it. But when you do come order Tito Arnold, it's iced tea and calamansi juice. It's a play on an Arnold Palmer. And ordered the Nihao Pompano. It's amazing, served whole, served on a banana leaf, just like you're in the ocean, or by the beach in the Philippines. So come by, check it out. Hopefully when is that? You know what, I'm thinking like, is it maybe February 2019. So.
Let's eat.
Thank you, Asian American International Film Festival, John Woo, and the entire staff for putting this event screening. Thank you so much, New York City.